Good afternoon. This is Kent Mulgat with Jim Check and our guest Loyal Wooldridge. The day after these crazy events now have the BC United Party out of the race for our upcoming provincial election. Here you are in Okanagan Centre. You had
Kelowna-Centre.
Sorry, Kelowna-Centre. Thank you. Now you just got, you'll just have one opponent. So what do you make of all this, Lo?
Well, I think this was a bizarre day in BC politics. It was, none of us were expecting this, including their own candidates.
Right? This late
in the game. Late, and you know.
I'm going to do this for you, though. Just a second. I'm just going to move this, and then I'm going to move this, because everybody wants to hear you.
Perfect.
So there you go.
Yeah, bizarre day in BC politics. Probably going to be studied and written about in the future, but we didn't expect this, but neither did their candidates, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine they had to do some, like this late in the process. It seems odd, and obviously I've talked to a few of the candidates on both sides of the other side, and there's a lot of, nobody knows who's who right now. Right.
Well, I like to call it right-wing chaos, really, is what it is, and they're, playing with
the
lives
right?
of, playing with the lives of British Columbians.
Okay, one of your responses was that you're describing this as the right wing playing games.
Yeah.
Or you could, but if you wanted to counter that, you could say it's off the A team. I love it when a plan comes together amidst the chaos.
Sure. But I think true leadership is really about collaboration, and had this been done earlier, it could have been done in an organized and steady-handed way. We're 6 weeks out from an election, and so now voters aren't going to know who their candidates are for a while yet. Candidates aren't going to know if they're the candidate for a while yet. Yeah. And life's hard for people right now, and we need to make sure that we're taking care of them.
Question for you. Have you heard from David Eby? Has he talked to the candidates, like the NDP candidates right now, and said, obviously this is a surprise for the NDP as well? Is there a message out that's been said to the candidates?
Well, it was definitely news. I wouldn't say it's a surprise. We've known that John Rustad and the BC Conservatives were our main opponent going into the election, so it hasn't really changed much in our approach because we know that we have to continue to deliver results for people and not lean into the right-wing bravado of climate-denying statements and things like that. So we did get together as a team yesterday, and Premier brought us together, and our message is that we're here to support people for the things that really matter.
Right. One of the things that I was reading that was part of this discussion is that the BC United Party had some opposition research about what some of the vulnerabilities are of some of the Conservative candidates. Well, wouldn't the NDP like to get their hands on that?
Well, it's pretty easy because I don't think you need to have the research. You could just scroll through social media feeds and see what some of their candidates are saying. And that's what's really concerning is this is who we're electing to lead our province, our government. And things are tough right now, really complex files like housing and homelessness and healthcare. We can't afford to be thrown into this political game of checkers.
So I guess the question would be from a lot of British Columbians, though. The NDP, not you, the NDP have had the wheel for 9 years.
Yeah.
How much of what's currently going on is their responsibility? And then saying they're going to fix it if they've had the wheel for 9 years.
Right. So what I would say is that we've been looking to adjust course from 15 years of disparity that was caused by the BC Liberals. And I think everyone needs to read this amazing book called Big Promises, Small Government by George Abbott, who was a former cabinet minister working with Kevin Falcon and John Rustad to really see what they plan to do, because it's exactly, if you read the book, exactly what they're putting in their election commitments. So we're writing the course of what had been done for 15 years, and these are big files that take time. You don't correct housing and healthcare in 9 years. You have to invest, train, and see those services correct. So there's a lot of work to do. The systems definitely are not perfect.
I haven't read this book,
but
interesting title.
Yeah.
So are you saying that promises can be done with big government? Is that what you're getting at, or I'm not sure?
What I'm saying is we're hearing a lot of the same political bravado from the past, saying we're going to cut down government, we're going to cut $4 billion from healthcare, and we're going to just find some efficiencies here or there. This book speaks about how the promises of Gordon Campbell was cutting 15% across all ministries, which contributed to the social issues that we see today. So these have impacts. People are going to say, we're just going to find efficiencies, fire some bureaucrats, and we're going to balance the budget. But at the end of the day, it's going to mean cutting services, because I work in a level of government right now where we can't run a deficit at the City of Kelowna, and we have to decide between, do we increase service, dial it back in order to have
or increase the tax base,
or increase the tax base. So we just have to be realistic with what what this actually means.
Right. You know, these are probably the more important conversations we're into now. But if you don't mind, I want to go back to what brought you in here. What does this mean for you? This shift. So here you are, an NDP candidate in a Kelowna riding. Sounds like an unlikely thing to win at first glance. But then you look at your riding. It's more urban. That tends to skew it more to the left. And then you had the joy of two right-wing parties who were at each other's throats, and there had to be some vote splitting that would happen. Now that's gone. Do you still have a chance? Or what do you think?
I truly believe so, because I've dedicated this portion of my life to public service as Loyal Wooldridge, the candidate. And I think people can look at my record just being on council of what I've advocated for, what we've attracted here to the city, and having a New Democrat representation in Kelowna with this balanced and steady leadership will help us move forward. And so this doesn't change the way I'm going to be campaigning. I feel confident in my team and what we've been doing, and we're going to continue to work hard for people. But at the end of the day, the only poll that matters is on October 19th.
So I have a question, though. John Rustad and Kevin Falcon have stated they're going to let their MLAs talk, which we haven't seen a lot, especially at the federal level where the MPs don't get to talk a lot. Has that promise been made to you where you're going to actually have a voice in this community where you can say what you want instead of like everything has to go through one person?
Yeah, that's why I'm here right now.
Yeah.
You know, we have the ear to the ground, and that's the thing I like about Premier Eby. He very much values the ear to the ground of community needs. And that's why I'm doing media today. Otherwise, I would just be silent about it. And so I don't feel like I'm restricted at all. And that's why I'm proud to run.
I think that's important for representation at the local community, because we're connected to you, right? Because, I know you and, like lots of people in the community. Because the thing about being in community is that, I see you at the grocery store and I can say, what's with that, right? Yeah. And then you have to answer to that, right? Because sometimes if we're, dealing with somebody that's, far out of reach, it's hard to get answers, right?
Totally. And look, Kelowna is unique, and there are some policies that were blanket across the province that I wish I could have had a voice around the caucus table when some of that was being created. And that's why I threw my hat in the ring. And it's no slight on government. It's just every community is unique. And if we want to have made in Kelowna solutions, we have to have someone here that's actually going to have that voice.
Okay, let's get to know you a little bit better politically. I don't think that it's difficult for me to figure where you go on the left or right spectrum. I do believe you even gave some consideration to maybe running for BC United, but then ultimately you decided that the NDP is more suitable. So clearly you're not a far left ideologue in terms of where you would sit in the caucus.
Look, I've been a centrist my entire political career, but my heart lies with helping people, with also having a business brain. And that's what I would bring to any caucus. I've seen the great work the BC NDP has done while I've sat on council the last 2 terms, and that's why I chose them. Right. I did support another party, and I've been very open about that. But when I saw what they contributed to the issues we see today and the values or lack thereof that they had, it made the choice pretty easy for me. Because when you see a government that's working hard to support people, that's where you can
One of the big messages out of the federal government, for sure, and it's been echoed by John Rustad, is axe the tax, like axe the carbon tax.
Right.
And then Kevin Falcon had a kind of a different approach to it, where he said he probably wouldn't raise it again, but he would also follow whatever Poilievre did if he formed government.
Right.
I did a recent interview with Sonia First to Know, and she also says that the current
leader of the Greens, by the way,
leader of the BC Green Party, also says that the current carbon tax needs to be scrapped, and it needs to be reworked, and it needs to be put on the wellhead, not on the people. And the NDP position, just to be clear, it's to continue with the carbon tax as it is.
I believe it has to be reevaluated. There's not been a commitment that it's going to stay the same permanently. I think any policy that evolves over time needs to be reevaluated. But again, it needs to be done in a way that's measured. Like just coming out with a blanket statement, axe the tax. Well, what are we actually trying to accomplish? What are the goals? Yeah. And I think that's the...
But what do you think of Sonia's kind of like statement? Like it seemed odd coming out of the leader of the BC Green Party, right?
I couldn't really comment, Jim, because I didn't see the interview.
Okay.
So
hey, it's something to watch, right?
So yeah.
And you've got something to read.
Yeah. There you go. I will read that.
So you've been going door to door, I've heard, quite a bit in those beautiful shoes you tend to wear. Not
really. I wear New Balances when I'm on the door.
So what are you hearing on the doorstep? Does it give you confidence?
Yeah. The 3 main issues that we are hearing about is housing, healthcare, and overall affordability. And those are the three main issues that continue to come up. And of course, in Kelowna, we hear a little bit about homelessness and safety. And those aren't surprises to me. I hear about these issues every single day when I'm sitting around the council table. And so those are the issues that I'm most passionate about and looking to deliver results for.
But is the response you're getting, does it give you a good feeling, or is some people going, NDP, get off my doorstep? What are you getting?
I've had two people tell me to get off their doorstep, and we've knocked on a heck of a lot of doors. But there's been a surprising amount of support, and a lot of people are supporting me because of who I am and who I've stood for, regardless of the party that I'm running with. So I'm very grateful for that.
Right.
So with regard to housing, because obviously that's a big issue for Kelowna, especially, or the central Okanagan, or the Okanagan in general. The federal government is now, Pierre Poilievre was pushing that, they could sell federal lands and some federal buildings. And now I think the Trudeau government is now talking about putting federal properties into the mix. Is that something that the NDP would also consider? Like, there's a lot of Crown land here that is available. Is that something the NDP's talk? Because a lot of the developers will say that there's not enough land.
Yeah, and that's actually been part of the housing plan from the get-go, especially using land that's around rapid transportation corridors.
So in the corridors, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so I don't necessarily think selling it off is a good idea, but I definitely think leasing it out for $1 so that it's held in perpetuity for people is a good thing.
So you sit on both sides of this. The BC government came out and really dipped its hand into the municipal playground, where as far as what developments were, and said, hey, everybody can have a carriage home wherever they want, and really modified your OCP. Is that something that is just an emergency thing, do you think, or is that something that'll carry on throughout government?
So government did not alter the OCP. It respects what is outlined in the OCP. What they did is they removed certain steps of the development rezoning process so that certain land uses could be granted as written in the OCP, which goes under a ton of public engagement. And that the whole methodology is to get more housing approved quickly. And sitting around the council table for 6 years, I can tell you, sitting through so many public hearings, not many people show up to support new housing. They usually show up against it.
Right.
And so government had to take a bold move. That's why it's the most ambitious plan in Canada, to say, look, we need to build more housing in the province. Kelowna is an exception. We've been very friendly at getting a lot of housing built.
Kelowna has done an amazing job of getting rental units into the market, and there's a lot coming online.
And infill, but there's a lot of communities that have not. And so that's why...
But the fact of the matter is, it did take some power away from local decision-making, but you think that is warranted.
It's an urgent crisis. It's a housing crisis. We hear it every single day. And so when we see our vacancy rate at a healthy rate of 3%, I think that conversation can change. But when we have students sleeping in their cars and people being evicted from homes living on the rail trail, different story.
How familiar are you with all of the NDP policies? Are you kind of getting up to speed on everything, or you feel pretty comfortable with everything?
Slowly but surely. Obviously, there's nuanced subjects. I'm not in government. And so I can't necessarily represent everything that government has done. But obviously, working in local government, I interact quite a bit with their policies.
Because again, Poilievre put out a policy, their statement, I think, on immigration, and we need to slow it down.
Right.
And David Eby also made comments to that effect just recently and say we have to stem or slow down it because we have the schools are full and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Do you have a thought on that?
So there's no question about it. We have the equivalent of a small city moving to British Columbia every single year, like 244,000 people. Where are they going to get healthcare, schools, and housing? So it has to be part of the mix. It has to be part of the plan in conjunction with the federal government.
But this is a federal issue, right? That you can elect who you want. It's the federal government.
But I mean, he can make noise, right? Like he can
make noise.
Right? So
back on that housing thing, and I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, but the one thing that I find upsetting about it is it all sounds good, this infill housing, and we're increasing supply and demand. That's science, right? But every time they go to do one of these infill things, they're taking down an older home or even an older condo building that had lower rent, and so it is upsetting that as we go to try to lower the cost of housing, we're taking away some of the most inexpensive housing.
Mm-hmm. It is part of the challenge of densification for sure.
You are a businessman. You have that history as well. Sonia, the leader of the BC Green Party, put out a policy statement, I think a couple of days ago, saying go to a 4-day work week. a lot of small businesses are already struggling in British Columbia. Again, I think our standard of living dropped last year. How do we look after the needs? Because obviously a 4-day work week sounds great to a lot of people, but how does business bear that? Like, how does that get there? How do we get there?
Well, first and foremost, I think you need to have a task force of business advisors that can actually share with you the struggles and the solutions to overcome. I think we use the Urban Development Institute as a good example of advocacy of development, and the same should happen in the business community. And those are questions that I need to ask around the caucus table, because you're right, business needs to be a focus. And it has gotten hard for people, but also businesses to turn a profit. How are we going to attract people and investors to Kelowna to open more businesses? It has to be part of that conversation and ask those questions.
One other big sticky one for me, and then I think I've got all the sticky ones out of the way. Airbnb policy. Renee Merrifield came out just recently saying it's the reason that tourism is hurting, and we know that tourism is hurting in Kelowna right now. And she said that is one of the big reasons, and also capital. Talked to quite a few people, say capital investment will go away from Kelowna. We see a lot of developments aren't selling now. How do you balance that? Like, we do have a ton of rentals now coming online. How do we balance people being able to have certainty when they make investments, and then also balance our tourism versus our housing needs?
Sure. And I think it's a great discussion point around short-term rentals, and that was a blanket policy we saw come out of Victoria. I would push back in that I don't believe tourism is down solely because of short-term rentals. We just had one of our largest fires last year. That creates a lot of anxiety for people. The cost of living has increased, and Kelowna isn't a cheap town to come and vacation to. And then, of course, there's the short-term rental discussion. I believe, and as a representative for Kelowna, we have a tourism commercial zone that we created in 1997. I would be advocating for the properties that were built in that zoning to be grandfathered in. We saw
because like Aqua was built,
correct,
and it was people followed the zone. You know, they made their investment based on the zoning that you guys put into place, and so they made that in good faith. And like there is a few, I think there's 6 or 7 towers in Kelowna that are kind of like
Sunset Drive.
Yeah, there's a few. There's not a lot. There was a lot of, I guess, illegal or under the radar Airbnbs. Wouldn't that be a better way to kind of do that policy, like what you're just saying, as opposed to just like a hammer?
Well, and I'll use Predator Ridge as an example. They have a BC NDP MLA, and they were able to work with government to have Predator Ridge excluded from this legislation.
West Kelowna too.
Well, West Kelowna is a different story. They're above 3% vacancy rate. But that's one of the things that I've brought forward to the Premier is, hey, we need to have a made in Kelowna policy, especially around short-term rentals. When we took the initiative in 1997 to create those zonings, people bought those properties with that
even if you consider, like, we have one of the major hospitals in the region, and a lot of people want to come to a short-term rental because they want to stay close to that loved one when they go through cancer and all that. You know what I mean? Like, and it's kind of like they have really no options now other than like a hotel, which can be very expensive, and you can't cook and you can't do all those other things, right?
Yeah, we still have 700 units of short-term rental throughout the city. I support measures to preserve long-term rentals.
Okay, but I just want to stop 1 second though, because there is 700, you say, but they've been also squeezed into when they can operate. Like I know somebody that has one, they can only operate for 3 months of the year.
6 months, I believe.
3 months. Nick?
Where's the fact-checking department?
Where's the fact-checking?
But let me ask you
It's
this.
3 months. That's what, I mean, he's only up 3 months. So
I'm sure that you will probably fine-tune what you would like to see also, but do you have any sense in your communication with the party that they're open to you saying, hey, maybe there are some elements in Kelowna that need some special attention on how this ban on short-term rentals is applied?
Well, I think policy in general, that, yes. I just wrote a paper and sent it off to the Premier recently around my position on short-term rentals, but also the investments that we need to see into our transportation infrastructure, our healthcare system. We need to have that ear to the ground locally to bring that forward to Victoria.
And you feel that the party is receptive to a
Absolutely.
conversation on
Absolutely.
that?
you drive an EV. I just talked to a car dealer yesterday, and the BC government modified the grant that was available for EVs to, it has to be under 50,000, which doesn't have a lot of EVs in that category anymore. I think only, like I only know 1 or 2. Why do you think they dropped that EV? Like some of the dealers say that it's hurting their sales on the EV market, which is getting tougher and tougher to sell.
Yeah, probably I would speculate. I would have to read the actual policy. I would speculate probably to ensure fairness in terms of buyers. If you're buying an $80,000 vehicle, it's harder to justify a grant from the government if you can afford that. So I would assume that would probably be the method.
They put the number down to 50 though, which doesn't get you much of a car.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that's a very average car.
It's not a lot.
Well, the price of vehicles, right?
Yeah.
I mean, one thing for sure. I mean, you've been in this community now how long?
Since 1993.
Since 1993, and you've served on council for 6 years now.
Yeah, for 6 years, 2 terms. Yeah.
No, and been a businessman probably
For 16 prior. Yeah.
So I guess, do you have anything you want to say today just to the Central Okanagan, people of Central Okanagan?
Yeah, I joined council because of the social issues we were seeing downtown. And I wanted to understand at a grassroots level, to understand our community from that level and how government works. And that's really key and crucial to attract investment here. And so I know what the city of Kelowna has prioritized in terms of our own priorities, like a Redfish Healing Center for people with complex care, a new transit yard to increase transit, advocacy on short-term rentals, and also the Highway 33 connection point to alleviate some of the traffic on Highway 97. So I've deeply embedded myself in the Kelowna issues and understand the solutions to overcome that. So that's really what I'm bringing to the table, and really asking people to vote for the person, not necessarily the party. So if someone supported the Conservatives in the past or the Greens, asking for that support.
Terrific. I really appreciate you coming in and
My pleasure.
spending this time with us.
We do appreciate that as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
KelownaNow definitely appreciates it, and we appreciate you, the viewer.
Thanks for watching.
There you go.
And tune into my quick cast as well.
There you go. We do appreciate you. We ask that you subscribe and do all those things. We have a newsletter that goes out to 30,000 plus people in the morning too. So
And a ton of content online.
Oh,
a ton of content online on KelownaNow.com. And we're trying to do probably more coverage of the BC election than most. We're doing these long form interviews, which I think you get to know the candidate more. We're asking tougher questions in a more respectful manner, I think, though, too, right?
Totally.
And I think that's good for the voter. And thank you for watching KelownaNow.